Hello, Isaac.
Hello, Rabbi. Happy Shabbos.
Happy Shabbos. It makes it you when you say that, it makes it sound like we are learning on the Sabbath, but we are not.
We are not.
There's a phrase in the Jewish tradition called Erev Shabbat, which
Hmm.
is the time period right before. So right now we are in Erev Shabbat. So you
Hmm.
say Happy Erev Shabbat or Good Erev Shabbat.
Well, happy every Shabbos. No,
Yeah,
it's
yeah.
not whatever, but happy Sabbath. We it's not the Sabbath yet. It's a few hours
It's
before
hard
before.
to pronounce the Hebrew. It's difficult.
It
What
took me a while. It took me a while to pronounce Shabbos.
when
And
my 6-year-old daughter came in, she's like, "Oh, you're gonna be with that having me with that guy." I'm like, "Yeah." He's like, "Oh, that British guy." And I'm like, "Who?" She's like, "The guy who speaks with a British." I don't know if she's an accent because she's 6. I don't know, but I feel like it could be every accent in the world that is not American sounds just British to her because she knows from Peppa Pig there is a British accent.
well, on that note, thank you.
Yeah. So
We could start.
congratulations, even either upgraded or downgraded depending on how you feel.
The Gospel according to Matthew, chapter 5, verse 8. Blessed are the pure in heart, for they shall see God.
Isaac, is this also one of your favorites?
In fact, this verse was a motto of my middle school.
It's so funny. Like when I see a verse, I'm like, oh, it's a bumper sticker. It's this. It's funny because you have all the same experiences, but in Christianity.
Yeah, but like this was a motto of the school, like blessed are the pure in heart, for they shall see God.
Yeah. I again, like I guess, like it's a good question. So why do you think that was the motto of the school?
I don't have an answer.
I mean, obviously they saw something educational or
Well, I mean, I
pedagogical.
think I think so. I think we have to draw the line between what this verse says and what we read into it.
Yeah, yeah. What did your school read
So,
into it?
they but I cannot speak for them. I would think they read that if you're pure, you'll see God. If you and whatever pure in heart meant. Now that
I
was
guess so. What you're saying is like, a lot of times when we look at youth, the goal of youth is that almost that blind faith and naivete in order to kind of have like this non-corrupt attitude, which is almost what's happening in the Beatitudes, to have this non-corrupt attitude. So to almost you start at birth again, like I guess like I would say you start pure of heart, but I guess you would say you start as a sinner. I don't know. But like you start with a certain naivete as a child, and you should keep that pure heartness, like that naivete, that beauty, and that will keep you connected to God. So I think like from if it's that attitude towards children, I think that's really nice. But I think like Christians don't believe in that attitude, right? They like Jews believe you start pure, I would say. Um, there's a verse by Noah that all children are evil from their youth. But putting that aside, I view, as we just talked about, from an existential perspective, it's a blank slate, and you got to have to like build that slate. So I don't know if you think that kids are like inherent. Again, I think there's a difference. Like they're not inherently evil, though, right? Kids, they're just born with sin, and born with sin does not mean evil in any way. It just means like something you have to deal with.
I think it's not just children. I think we start with I think with Christianity, we start the axiom that everyone is born in sin.
Yeah,
However old you are, young you are, it doesn't matter.
but I feel like you can be born of sin but have a pure heart, probably from your school's motto, right?
So it depends on what you mean by pure in heart, right? So let's okay,
I
let's
was
leave.
that's literally one of my questions. Oh, what is pure? I'm just kidding.
Okay,
What is pure of heart?
let's leave the motto aside. I want to. You're the rabbi, so I want to ask you: Blessed are the pure in heart, for they shall see God. What do you read into
Okay,
this?
so well, again, like usual, I like to go slow. So pure of heart, I wanted to like maybe break down a little bit because a lot of people want to look towards Psalm 24:3-5. So if you have that in front of you, pop it out, and that's like the phrase pure of heart happens there. Lev tahor. So 23. What I said 23:5, right?
Not 23, Psalm 20. Hmm.
Psalm
No.
23, Psalm 24, verse 3 to
Mhm,
5.
mhm.
Okay, so if you look at Psalm 24, you'll see, he shall ascend into the hill of the Lord. Oh my God, look, there's a hill. How exciting. Or he shall stand in his holy place. He that has clean hands and a pure heart.
Mhm.
I can't read like Shakespearean Old English. He hath not lifted up his soul unto vanity, nor sworn deceitfully. So when we look at verse 4, first of all, verse 3 feels like it's Jesus on the Sermon on the Mount. So you see why people would, at least independent, this is the source, would look towards this, especially as it's not in Luke. It looks like it's added by the Matthean community. So when it says he has clean hands and a pure heart in Psalms, does that really mean his hands are physically clean?
Okay,
And
so I think so. The Psalms are much more the Psalms are much more
are poetic,
poetic, more
right?
poetic. It's meant to be.
So one thing that I want, when I looked at this originally, I saw pure in heart. And if this is the phrase in Hebrew, it doesn't really mean pure of heart. Like if you look in Hebrew at all the different phrases for like a person who acts like wrongly, it always has like a different character trait. It combines a compound word. So I think like pure in heart, it probably better to say something like, again, you could tell me what a better one word, like brave. It doesn't really mean that your heart it's a concept. So I think when it says, I think it's straight of heart is probably a better translation. But when it says that, it probably means like when someone's straight of heart or pure in heart, it probably means like good person, or it could mean a person who is not doesn't lean towards sin, but it doesn't actually mean pure heart.
I
And
think
it has to
the
be a
way,
deeper
yeah,
concept.
the way I so thank you, thank you for pure heart. That it's more
Rev tahor, yeah.
it's more of a poetic device. And so I've understood pure heart as people who live with integrity, as in, this it's hard to define pure heart. What is pure heart? But you know, I think we can point to people who live lives with integrity and ones who don't. And part of integrity is to have courage, or to wrestle with what's acceptable, not what to do, what not to do, and try and but make every but make every effort to live out one's values in a way. In a yeah, to live out one's values anyway. So pure in heart, in a way, I've understood pure in heart to mean um, an integrity of life, of lifestyle, of thinking and being, and folks do that, for they shall see God. I don't mean this. I don't think this meant as you physically see God, but as in you'll be able to see the works of God. There's this famous Christian monk. It's a person I admire. I've read quite a bit. Thomas Merton. Have you heard of Thomas Merton? Thomas Merton lived in Kentucky. He has an abbey there, and
I
he
don't
was
think
good.
I've ever heard anyone say the word Abby out loud and mean it. So that's very exciting.
Well, she's my boss. Well, I don't mean that. I mean, okay. He has a place called Gethsemane Abbey in Kentucky. Anyway, so uh, in one of his books, he writes, Lord, open my eyes to expressions of your will. And the point is, God is at work, and God is at work, has always been at work. It is it's human beings who miss out on what he's doing. And he connects that with this verse. I said, the pure heart is not so much about they physically seeing God, maybe some might, but folks who will be able to identify the work of God, and as you would say, um, the ruah of God, right? Isn't that the word you used earlier?
Ruach.
Yeah, ruach of God. So
Almost.
almost okay. So anyways, that's my reading of "Blessed are the pure in heart, for they shall see God."
Yeah. Okay. So that makes sense. It's a complicated phrase. When you look at Psalms throughout, you could do a search just of the Hebrew word heart, and you'll see sometimes it says like a happy heart, or say a broken heart, or it has various phrases like that no one thinks it means heart, and it's like some value. And it's very important, I think, to try to figure out what a lev tahor, a pure heart, would be. What I do think is really interesting is that if it's true that it means like you like an attitude towards the world, like you're saying, like integrity or something, then it very very much would parallel the earlier one of 5:7, that blessed are the merciful, blessed are the integral. So it's almost I think we see some parallel between the an attitude where we saw in the first ones either poor or meek or more like different attitudes. I think this would be like generally positive attitudes towards the world and how they will be responded and rewarded. Because I think our first kind of attitudes we had were all negatives, like, oh, you're mourning, oh, you're poor in spirit. But over here we have someone who's merciful. We pointed out, merciful could have a positive, negative connotation, but at the end of the day, it's a person who acts like a positive way he's life, the way he lives his life. And I think from the way we look at the Beatitudes, it's a very strong transition, right? We have that no longer, like, the merciful is not inherently the downtrodden. The merciful is the person who specifically is acting the right way.
Hmm.
He's acting the way that I guess Jesus would want you to act, and
Hmm.
also life to horror. So I think that this person is not recuperating from a negative situation in the way that the poor in spirit, unfortunately, he or she is poor in spirit, and yet the kingdom of heaven is his. Unfortunately, he or she is mourning, and yet the kingdom of heaven is his. But here it's not unfortunate. Here it's a very strong transition. I think we have to take note of almost like this apex
Hmm.
that the Beatitudes are going to. It's like, negative, and then we're getting like, oh, now we're getting merciful, and then we're getting a pure heart, and then we're getting peacemakers. And you could argue that we're building up more towards the community, because I think that when we look at the poor in spirit, we want to say those are part of the Christian community, but are they really? Do they just have easier access to the kingdom of heaven because they're not had all the negativity that we have, but they're not really at the kingdom of heaven yet, right? They just because you're poor in spirit, you're not adulterated by those other attitudes. When it says, "For theirs is the kingdom of heaven," I would interpret
It's exclusive.
it's theirs. I'd say it's theirs for the taking. It's theirs to be there, but they're not really there yet. We were talking about identity. While the merciful, they're like 2/3 of the there. I think we kind of don't talk about how much was Jesus trying to transition pragmatically, the people that he was around, and how much does Jesus recognize that some people really were better than other people, even like when you look at the 12 apostles. I don't know if you've ever tried to rate them from your favorite to least favorite, or from most holy to least holy, but
Well,
we
see, why do you, like, how do you define holiness? There
no,
is
no,
no
I'm just saying, like in the end of the world, if God had a holiness meter, and like where you
Oh,
get in heaven, everyone's different,
well,
and a lot.
thank you, Paul. Thank you, Paul. That question becomes redundant.
Well, no, but maybe. But over here, what we're seeing is that the people who are merciful, or the people who are pure heart, or people who are peacemakers, they should have less of a effort to get to the kingdom of heaven. There's not as much a transition that would.
So, okay, let me put this back to you. So, what is the basis? Like, is there a basis for 5:8 in the Torah, or in the law and the prophets, or in the
Well,
so
we didn't get to the second half of the verse, so I don't want to answer that yet.
so even the term pure in heart, right?
Yeah, we see it in Psalm.
So, okay, Psalms was that's one place. It's a poetic device. Now, are you saying that Matthew 5:8 was also meant to be a poetic device, like a poetic form? Like,
100% all the Beatitudes. I'm not telling you on the literal level what we should take, but 100% we spoke about how there's multiple levels taking place here, and we're doing our due diligence by analyzing it. And when you look at Psalm 5, 24:5, it kind of feels like, right? It feels like the Beatitude. He's on a mountain, he's on a hill, clean hands, pure heart, no vanity, no lie. And next line, and he shall receive the blessing from the Lord in 24:5, and righteousness from the King of his salvation. I mean, it feels again like it feels very similar but different. So I think from the context, we need to analyze 24 Psalm by itself, and we need to add the Beatitudes by themselves. But yeah, I would say very, very concretely, these are meant to work on multiple layers, just like the Psalm is meant to be poetically and allegorically and symbolically working on multiple different levels. Okay, so let's go to the second half. For they will see God. Are they going to see God? He's standing right in front of them, right? What does that mean?
so the way I've understood this is by when they shall see God, that God will open their eyes to His work in the world. Just the way the Magi were able to see God's work in the world through through astrology, and they found the child Jesus, and again, and so I don't mean see God as in physically, literally see God, because no one can see God, no one has seen God, and no one can see God. Moses probably saw a part of God, and so I look at this as this means that these folks who have a pure heart, they will be able to identify God's work in this world. I think identifying God's work is like finding diamonds in that. It's like finding diamonds in. It's in the, what do you call it? I'm blinking on the word. It's not easy to identify God's work. Sometimes it's clear, sometimes it's not clear. And the biggest privilege they have, because they're pure, because their hearts are pure, is God reveals His work to them.
Well, what's interesting, yeah, I mean, like we'll talk about in a couple seconds if you could see God. But now, if you go back to that psalm, you see why everyone loves this psalm when they look at the Beatitudes. The very next line of the psalm First we had a hill and a mountain, then we had pure heart, then we had no lying, and then we had this is a blessing, we had the righteousness, salvation, and now 24:6 we have this is the generation of them that seek him, that seek his face. Oh, Jacob Selah. So we see again another parallel that they're about people who are seeking his face. And you mentioned probably the most famous example where Moses did ask to see God's face. Moses asked in Exodus 33:18 that he thought it would be appropriate to let me see, and God says, no, you can't see my face. But I think that the basic assumption is that a prophet, even if they are not able to see the physical face of God, they should be able to see the symbolic face of God. You know, if we imagine a being, then they should be able to see this. So it's really interesting when we talk about seeing, you kind of are already speaking in a very philosophical way. You're like, you can't see the face of God. And you say that with such not hubris, but positivity. You're like, and so if I ask you, why can't you see the face of God? You'd be
No,
like,
nobody has seen God because it's different. He's a different being. No one has seen God.
what if God wants you to see him? Can he make
That's okay. That's a different thing. But so far, nobody has seen him. Have you seen him? Have anyone in the prophet? Have any of the prophets seen him? No, they haven't. They've probably heard his voice, maybe. Moses saw a part of him, or he tried to see a glimpse of him.
so what's the difference to your eyes? Why can Moses see what's the difference seeing a part versus seeing his face?
So the point is, God is a different being. It's not the same kind
So
of
why
being
are
as
you able to
human.
see any of him?
Okay, I'll have to look back the passage in the
Okay,
passage where
now Moses said 33:18, show me your glory. And the Lord said, I will cause all my goodness to pass in front of you and will proclaim my name, the Lord, in your presence, and have mercy on whom I will have mercy. Sounds like we heard this before. And I have compassion on whom I have compassion.
yeah.
But he said, you cannot see my face, for
Mhm.
no man can see my face and live. But you're making it sound like no man could see God at all. But
So the point is,
yeah,
does God have a form, right? So we look at God as a being. Does he have a form? But that's why we look at Jesus, where God came to earth in the form of man, as in this was the God man. But without Jesus, when we don't see the face of God,
you're so obvious.
huh?
This is God. You can't see. Man.
No, honestly, seriously. Okay, no, this is
You're
philosophical,
saying
right?
like,
God is a
I don't
different
know.
being. God is a different. He's an ontologically different being than human beings.
I'm not saying I
Um,
disagree. I'm just saying when it says, if you're pure in heart, they will see God.
okay, so what are the other ways this could mean they shall see God, if not just physically?
Well, you know, it can mean that his glory passes in front of you, whatever that means. It can mean they have a philosophical understanding of God. It can mean that God will lead their life in a certain various ways,
See,
or it can mean that
okay,
they'll see God.
could it also mean that those who are pure in heart will know the God man Jesus? Because if he was God, God and man, could that be a possible read of this verse?
I don't know. It could have said that. Why doesn't it just say you'll see me?
You will see God. Me, God, they both are the same. Jesus is God because he uses
Does
his word.
Jesus use
He
the word
uses this.
God interchangeably? Again, with himself or no?
He prays to the Father. Me, you, and I are one. You know, so there are the places where he does speak. Right, when you read the Gospel of John, it gets a bit too.
Who is this John gospel you speak of?
Okay, fine. It's further down. It's further down the line. But now I'm again. Could this also mean for they shall see God? Meaning he's saying if you're pure heart, that then you shall see me. I said because he's a God man.
Yeah, it's fine. You know, from a Christian read, I would say it's not the best read in the text.
I
Um,
would I would not deny that. That's true. That's not the best in the text. So that's the way in which we can physically see God, and no one has seen God. I look at this as for they shall see God as in
okay,
a
let me take
to
a step
see.
back from the
Okay.
theology because I don't have an opinion. You know, that sounds fine. No, I mean I don't. But let me ask you a
Of course
question.
you do. Okay, go ahead.
No, I mean theology, theology. But when it says that you'll see God, why do you think to take the text seriously? Why
Mhm.
is that verb used? You will experience God. You will be led by God. You will love God. You will hear God. You will feel God. Why does it say you will see God?
Isn't this a summary, a summary of Psalm 24, 5 to 6, right? Because there it's
Yeah, it says it, then you'll see. I think that's fine. I don't know if it's a summary, but you're saying it's the precursor. It kind of takes hints from that, and that's fine. That's a possibility. But all that does is open up if you say that, it's like a cop out. You're saying, I don't need to answer your
Okay,
question
so
because
okay,
it's in Psalms. So I'll just say, okay, in Psalms, what does it mean in Psalms that they want to see God's face?
it's a point. So okay, so can I put this question back to you? So what does it mean by for they shall see God?
Okay. So yeah. So Maimonides in the Mora Nevuchim and the Guy Perplex actually has a chapter on what it means to see God.
Yeah, yes, uh-huh.
Well, so number one, I think as a philosopher, Maimonides was very concerned about these
Now, okay, is Maimonides, is he a philosopher or is he a theologian? I feel like
Oh my God.
he
What
goes
is
back and
what is the
forth, right?
question?
He goes back and forth, or he mixes both theology and philosophy into one.
The strong separation that I always make between theology and philosophy probably is more post Descartes. Maimonides says that you should study theology and then throw it all away and start from scratch philosophically, but only because he believes your philosophy will lead to his theology. So I feel like if he didn't believe that, I'm not sure he would say that. Let me take out this. Anyway, so he says that to see is to have philosophical understanding of God. But what I want to point out is the much more simple dichotomy. There's two kinds of experience in the world, two kinds of knowledge that one could gain from experience. You could gain firsthand experience from seeing, or you
Mhm.
can gain secondhand experience from understanding. So when we talk about understanding, a lot of times we're talking about you could have seen it and that's how you got it, but it's just good to have secondhand experience. I think what we're trying to say over here in this beatitude is we're trying to differentiate between those two kinds of experience. When I ask to seek God, I'm asking for not like when Moses asks to seek God in Exodus, independent of the philosophical or mystical background you need for that, what he's really trying to say is that I want firsthand experience. Seeing is not understanding. So I think what it's saying over here is asking for like almost this higher level of access to God, and that if you're pure in heart, in the Beatitudes, it's someone who already, again, like you could talk about, has a different identity. As we said, we're going up. The merciful, the pure of heart, the peacemaker. These are people who should have a better attitude to God, and therefore relationship to God, and therefore they're not going to need as much divine intervention in order to get to this end place. They're going to be able to see God, whatever see means, but it means in a firsthand experience. And maybe, like you said, through the acts in the world or whatever. But I think that the verb of seeing is integral to understanding this, as opposed to understanding. And if anything, it's really interesting. We know that the brain is where our thoughts come from, right? But in the olden days, they didn't know that. They thought their heart was a much more integral part. The heart was like the thing that kind of runs your body. Without your heart, you couldn't.
Rabbi, there's nothing there in the brain. All they have is neurons and chemicals and signals. And so if we see a signal, yeah. So
The,
so
the
it probably can say some consciousness. So if you want to go even deeper, we'll say consciousness. But to your point, right, you're making the distinction that this is seeing, as in seeing is a form of understanding. This reminds me of a class I took on the sacraments a few years ago. The
I'm saying it's
faculty.
not understanding, though. I'm saying it's firsthand experience as opposed to something you get through secondhand understanding.
I see, but the purpose of the first-hand experience, right, is so you can see something but not understand it. Isn't understanding of primary importance, either first-hand or second-hand, to understand that you've seen some? I mean, the folks saw Jesus, as you noticed, but nobody understood who he was. And only a handful of them, quite a few had first experience of him, but not everyone understood him. So do you? I mean, do you make a distinction between seeing, as in understanding through seeing, or
Well, again, that's why I'm trying to separate out of understanding. I'm just saying seeing is firsthand, and firsthand, like you can understand it or not, but it's a different relationship. I might, if I know if my grandfather is alive and I
Mhm.
experience him, I may not understand a word he says because he speaks too deeply or intelligently, but I will have a sense of him, as opposed to if he's dead and I read the same exact words he says, I
Mhm.
have a very different experience of him because it'll be all secondhand knowledge. I'm just pointing out that seeing is inherently firsthand knowledge. It's not through an intermediary. So I just think that's important for us to notice. And it's interesting. It's again, I just want to make the play on the words. Lave, for better or worse, independent of the fact the heart. Sorry, lave, heart, for better or worse. It's a part of your body, and seeing is a part of your body. The very nature of these two phrases, it's saying it's taking like a very integral aspect of the human experience to understand the situation. None of the other phrases, poor in spirits, more, none of them are really focused on the body as much, aside from maybe hunger, possibly. So, but over here we almost have like two body parts. The seeing is done with the eyes. The humble, what's the phrase? The pure of heart is done with your heart. So it's just a cuteness that we're able to say, like, to use your body to in the service of God. Okay, Isaac. On that note.
On that note, we'll have a happy Shabbos.
Yeah. Okay. You too.